i benvingudes i benvinguts. Faré la presentació en anglès perquè la Eva ens entén i també ve acompanyada per dues companyes de la seva feina, el seu govern i doncs això. So welcome, Eva and Paul and Marianne. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you with us, and we're very, very excited to hear what you have to share today. I would first like to introduce Eva. Eva holds office of the president for the Nisga'a Lissims Nation. Eva became the 7th elected president of the Nisga'a Nation and the first female Nisga'a to hold this prestigious position in a regular election on November 2nd, 2016, so some time ago. Eva's public service to the Nisga'a Lissims Nation spans decades in various administrative and political capacities. In fact, she began with the Nisga'a Tribal Council in 1982 as an executive assistant. And while working with the Nisga'a Tribal Council, Eva had the privilege of working closely with many leaders of the day, including the late Dr. Frank Calder, James Gosnell, Rod Robinson, who were very key and active in negotiating what would become the final agreement for the Nisga'a Nation. And Eva will explain how exciting this landmark agreement was and is still today. Eva became the first female Nisga'a chief counselor to the new Ainash village government from 2004 to 2008. Sorry for my pronunciation, Eva. And prior to this, she held various terms as counselor for the then Gitlat Shamik's Band Council, which is now the village government. And while chief counselor for the new Ainash, Eva also served as the chair for the Nisga'a Programs and Services Committee and also represented her village government on the Finance Committee. So in the days leading up to the final, the date of the final agreement for the Nisga'a Nation, Eva chaired the Nisga'a Ratification Committee, a committee that was responsible for overseeing the ratification of the Nisga'a final agreement. So welcome, Eva, and also welcome, Paul. Paul is here also to support and answer any questions as well, I'm sure, at the end part as the communications coordinator and also with the Intergovernmental Relations Department, as is Marianne, also here today to record the webinar and also as part of the Intergovernmental Relations Department. So welcome, all three of you, and I'll hand the floor to Eva.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm pleased to be here. I'm also pleased to make a presentation to on Nisga'a Lissims government and the overall governance based on the Nisga'a Treaty. We're happy to be here and we're happy to be sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so just maybe to give a brief overview for today. So Eva will start with a presentation and then I will ask a few questions. And then around 8 o'clock our time, so in about 15 minutes, we hand it over to the participants also to ask any questions that you may have. If you have questions that start emerging over the course of the presentation, you can also put them into the chat and we can collect them that way. All right, I'll hand it back to you, Eva.
Thank you. I will begin with the Nisga'a Nation governance model. Nisga'a government has been the final treaty as BC's first modern treaty, and I became, as you've heard, the first female elected. Next slide, Paul. We have had a long history leading up to the final agreement. Many of our nations, our leaders, our ancestors, and those who have passed on, our elders, fought a long, hard battle to get to where we are today. And I'm here to give you that overview of the treaty. And there we are on the journey. And you see me there in the very early 80s, working alongside all of our nation's leaders. So, and there I am again, leading up to the work that has been cut out for me to carry on with the work started by our elders, our ancestors, and of course our esteemed leaders who have since passed on. The history of the nation began in 1913, and it was through common bowl approach, which means that we took the common bowl where all of our hereditary chiefs put all of their lands into the common bowl, and we came, our leaders back then, you see the picture there, that's our leaders in 1913. They made their way to the Privy Council, made a presentation on the petition. It's been a long, hard battle for our people. You'll see all of our esteemed leaders there. In 1955, the Nisga'a Land Committee is reestablished with for the Tribal Council, headed up by Frank Calder, who was elected to be the very first president of Nisga'a Tribal Council. And the 1913 petition sets out the mandate to seek a treaty. That was the whole purpose of the 1913 petition. And in 1973, the social credit group then affirms the existence of the Aboriginal title in the Calder decision, because Dr. Calder took the government to court on that. Thank you. In 1976, following the Calder decision, the Nisga'a Nation entered into negotiations under what was then known as the Comprehensive Land Claims Policy with Canada. 1991, British Columbia formally joined the negotiations. And in 1998, the Nisga'a Treaty and the Nisga'a Constitution were ratified and adopted by the Nisga'a Nation. In 2000, May 11th, the effective date of the final agreement. This marked the very first sitting of what we call today Nisga'a, which is the legislative body for the Nisga'a Nation. We sit as one, 4 communities and the 4 elected officers. The Nisga'a have 2,000 square kilometers of Nisga'a lands. We negotiated 190 million in capital transfers over 14 years. And we have the right to hunt for food, social, and ceremonial purposes in 16,000 square kilometers of Nisga'a traditional lands. We also have a right to fish for food, social, and ceremonial purposes in 26,000 square kilometers of Nisga'a traditional lands. We have the repatriation of the sacred artifacts of BC and Canada. In fact, one of our communities was just successful in repatriating and getting back a totem pole from Scotland. So we will make that trip at the end of August to Scotland. We also have inherent right to self-governance, where we define our jurisdiction, our lawmaking authority. You see in the map there, it sets out that the Nisga'a Nation, under the treaty, has constitutionally protected rights, interests, and jurisdiction in the 2,000 square kilometers of Nisga'a lands, shown in yellow area. And we have the 16,000 square kilometers in Nisga'a Wildlife Area, which you will see is the in the lime-colored area. As well, we have 26,000 square kilometers in the NAS area, which is the moss-colored and area. With the Nisga'a Treaty, the Nisga'a Nation has lawmaking authority, and that's to provide governance, administration. We have a Nisga'a Elections Act. We have a Nisga'a Fiscal Financial Administration Act. We also have a Nisga'a Lands Act, Nisga'a Land Title and Assets Act. We also oversee legislative authority in the public safety, language and culture, education from K to 12 and post-secondary. As well, we have health authority. We also have the ability to make laws in relation to child protection, custody, and adoption. We also provide social services to our citizens on Nisga'a lands, as well as we have the ability for the solemnization of marriages, traditional healing practices, fisheries and wildlife, forestry. We also have authority for environmental protection, policing, emergency preparedness, and direct taxation. The Nisga'a government structure, at the top we have the Constitution of the Nisga'a Nation. This provides for Nisga'a government and the Nisga'a village governments, including which includes the duties, composition, and members of government. We have 4 national offices: the Office of President, Chairperson, Secretary Treasurer, and we also have the Chair for a Council of Elders. We also have a Chief and Council of the 4 Nisga'a village governments, from Gitlikdam's village government, Gitwansif, Lackles App, and Gingosh village governments. We also have urban local representatives to provide for programs and services for our Nisga'a citizens who reside in the urban areas of Terrace, Prince Rupert, Port Edward, and Vancouver. You'll see there we have a breakdown, a chart of showing Nisga'a government. Right at the top, you have Wilpsia Yuklisqa. Wilpsia Yuklisqa, or WSN, is comprised of the 4 national officers, the 4 chiefs and councils of Nisga'a village governments, and the 3 urban locals, as well as the Council of Elders. As we also have Nisga'a government executive, otherwise can be known as the cabinet. When the executive meets, they meet once a month, whereas Wilpsa Yuklisqa gathers and has sessions on a quarterly basis, where the executive report to Wilpsa Yuklisqa. You see below there the 4 villages of Gingol, Shackles, App, and Gitwansif, and the village governments, and the 3 urban locals, as I talked about, Vancouver, Prince Rupert, and Terrace. We have 23 years of implementing the Nisga'a Treaty today. 23 years where the Nisga'a Nation is and has been and continues to work actively in developing a sustainable economy that will provide long-term employment to our citizens. We also have announced to the world that we are open for business. Are there any questions?
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Eva. That was very, very informative. And we have several people here who are involved in local government, either as public servants or also in government itself. So this, I'm sure, was of quite a lot of interest to them. But let's begin a little bit further back. So both you and the Nisga'a history are impressive and inspiring. When we were designing the questions for this webinar, we remembered a 1982 paper called History of the Ideas Underlying the Balaton Group, which was written by Donella Meadows, who is was a leading thinker in holistic thinking or systems thinking. She was a former professor at MIT, and she's a huge inspiration for us. And that paper opens up starts with a conversation between her and a couple other leading thinkers in systems called John Todd and Vernon Rutten. And they were exploring different questions. So I'm going to say these questions out loud, and then I'm going to ask you one. So the first question is, how does a society develop the capacity to invent institutions and technologies that truly fit its own culture and environment? And the other question is, how can this society filter through the inventions and impositions of the rest of the world and choose what really works for them in their own context? And so we thought that probably the Nisga'a people would be perhaps able to answer this. And I don't know what you think about these two questions, if you have some reflections, especially given, you know, this remarkable journey from start to finish of doing this exact same process.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. So it's the first question. How did we develop, how do societies develop the capacity? I will share what the Nisga'a Nation began developing institutions prior to the Nisga'a Treaty. In other words, the Nisga'a began getting ready before we actually came into treaty. And I will provide examples. We have the Nisga'a Valley Health Authority. We also have School District 92, Wopulhask Nisga'a, and these are Wopulhask Nisga'a eventually partnered with the University of Northern BC to build capacity to ensure, and we our forefathers had the insight to make sure we had institutions to build capacity, to ensure that we had health programs and services for our people, as well as educational institutions and societies, so that our people can pursue their educational goals. And how it can filter through to the world and to choose what really works in its own context. We really believe that this will happen on its own throughout the progress of our people. It will be our people who will ultimately prove to be successful with the tools they gained in the Nisga'a processes. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you so much. That was very, very inspiring. So, and I can see some of these that we can perhaps explore how to apply, like even the education system. It would be really interesting to explore that here. The next question is based on the last slide of your presentation, where you talk about sustainable economy and creating long-term employment for Nisga'a people. And you emphasize that you're open for business. So in Catalonia these days, we have a big cooperative movement going on. So we're trying to generate a new type of economy that has as its purpose a communitarian approach to economy, as well as being rooted to place. But it's difficult to look around for inspiration to see how we can keep evolving this pretty new but fast spreading cooperative economy. So the question is, how is the Nisga'a Nation creating an economy that's consistent with its own values, with its cultural values especially? And how can Indigenous worldviews, specifically the Nisga'a worldview, reconcile with your economy with the current extractivist capitalist economy?
Okay, thank you for the questions. The Nisga'a Nation continues to work to create an economy current and consistent with our principles and our values of what we call Nisga'a. That's our culture, Nisga'a. And we have been working towards this to make sure that the principles and values of Nisga'a are consistent with whatever partnerships we get into, whatever areas of building the economy we get into. An example is tourism. We're looking at and have been recently getting into the area of tourism. Our valley, the Nisga'a Valley, is pristine. It's untouched. And so when we're looking at tourism, we're looking at ways to implement and utilize our elders to storytell, to tell stories about the Nisga'a Nation, about the various areas within our lands. So we're using that. As well, we're looking at working with other nations when we talk about building the economy, not just for the Nisga'a, but we're also looking at building the economy for the north. One of the areas that the Nisga'a is looking at is protecting our environment. We continue to work towards making sure that we are protecting our environment, and the Nisga'a have that ability through the Nisga'a Environmental Act, which will be coming down shortly. And for the open to business statement made by one of our former presidents, that's basically a welcome slogan to let people know and let the world know that the Nisga'a Nation is open for business. And of course, it'll be the government that will define the nature of the business.
Yeah.
And for the Indigenous world views on reconciling with the extractivist paradigm, we know that the economic corridors are under construction across the world. And we also know that trillions of dollars are being spent, which will have significant implications on the international politics and ultimately world over. We continue to keep ourselves apprised to this, especially since Indigenous people must play a large role in the reconciliation world over. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I mean, there's a lot of connections, I think, here with this idea of storytelling, which in Catalan we refer to as el relat, and connecting it to this kind of more, sustainable or landed tourism. That's lovely. And also, I love that inter-cooperation or between the different nations in the North. That's really valuable. Maybe just to keep going on the reconciliation, how would you define reconciliation? Or how do you understand reconciliation from a Nisga'a perspective?
For me, reconciliation is making amends from past wrongs. And this is what the federal and provincial governments in Canada are doing with the Indigenous people, the Indigenous peoples across Canada, what they call UNDRIP. And it's a reconciliation process to work towards amending past wrongs. That's my understanding.
All right, thank you very much. It's a term that we're starting to hear used a lot here, so it's helpful to start really understanding it a bit more deeply. So many people here today have heard about the very tragic and horrific stories of residential schools in Canada, news which shook the world when it came to public light. And in Catalonia, on a different scale, obviously, we also had public and residential schools where Catalan children were forced to speak Spanish, learn Spanish history, and were persecuted for or punished for speaking Catalan. Catalan activists were imprisoned and assassinated during the dictatorship. But since the dictatorship ended, we never really did this reconciliatory process. And this pain is still alive in our communities today. So maybe a continuation of what we were just saying now. How can we heal this type of intentional violence directed towards suppressing a whole culture, in this case, the Catalan culture? And how can we regain the connection and stewardship of our land and our sea that we steward?
Thank you for the question. The people who did this must reconcile with your people. The Catalan must regain their true identity and must revive your culture, your connection to the land and the sea. Indigenous people have always had that connection and stewardship to their lands, always. And that's where our stories come from. We must, and you must regain the ownership of your culture and your land and your sea, because that's what we did in Canada, in our area, and makes a big difference. But for the trauma as a result of the schools, whether it's residential schools, Indian day schools, their trauma we must help our people. The Nisga'a Nation recently called for the Nisga'a Mental Health Act, which is certainly underway. It's still in play, but we want to roll that out so that we help our citizens to get over all of the trauma that they faced in their lives, whether it comes from residential schools or other areas. We're working that out. Right now, there are many treatment centers in our area, but what our people have been crying out for is aftercare. What happens after treatment? There is no aftercare. So we've heard them loud and clear, and we're looking at that. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. You mentioned that you've gone through a process of reclaiming and recovering the Nisga'a people's connection to land and sea. I was just wondering how you went about doing that, if it was something structured or something that came to be, something intentional.
That is always within our Nisga'a, our elders always talked about our ties to the land, shared stories that we have tied to the land. Many Nisga'a hereditary names, they're all attached to the land. And they reminded us of this. And when our leaders went into negotiations, that was one of the biggest pushes. We have to have this and we have to do this. And so when we think about what our negotiators did, they created what we have, the Council of Elders. It helps to keep our land alive. It helps us to and reminds us that we must protect the loss of our language, the Nisga'a language.
That is so inspiring, this creation of Council of Elders, and that it's connected directly to sorry, I'm getting very emotional, very directly connected to the Nisga'a government. How does that work? How do they counsel both government and I guess the people as well?
They sit as on a quarterly basis, sometimes depending upon what issues face the government. They're there to assist the government. They're there to provide the advice to the government. And we have the executive chair of the Council of Elders who chairs those meetings and provides the information to the Council of Elders. And at times they'll invite the office of president and the various officers to explain things. We walk with the Council of Elders in matters that are facing the government. They also sit with Nisga'a and provide advice to the government.
Okay, all right. That's a very, very interesting how you've been able to make that legislation structural in your community. So, I mean, clearly elders are very important and honored and have a place in Nisga'a culture. But in Catalonia, oh, sorry. Did you want to
We
say
should
something?
add too that
Yeah.
the Council of Elders is also made up of hereditary chieftains and matriarchs, men
Okay.
and women,
Okay.
the male and female elders.
All right, and it's hereditary, so it's a title that's passed down. Okay.
Yeah, it's lineage.
It's a
Yes.
lineage. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I'm just trying to make the connections to Catalonia. It would be lovely to maybe even see how something like that could happen. But I understand that you're saying an important first step for self-government or a certain level of autonomy is really reaffirming your culture. And maybe to go back to the elders in Catalonia, our elders actually don't have a societal role, and we normally don't look to them for counsel. And many of them are isolated and definitely not honored. On the contrary, the elders we speak with in the work that we do, they say they often feel excluded, not appreciated, and even they sometimes say that they feel like they're a burden to their communities. So maybe just to go a bit deeper into that, like what is the potential of bringing back elders to their rightful societal role, having them as counselors in our communities? And how do you think a place like Catalonia could do that?
One way is to begin to gather up your elders. Like we have statistics on the number of elders in each of our communities within our nation. But I think the first step is to gather them up, provide them with a place to sit down and to see how they can work with your people to develop and to reconcile. Because I think what's going to happen here is the Catalan must reconcile with their elders and their true identities. When you sit with the elders, you'll hear the experience of the elders, you'll hear the stories of the elders, and you'll also receive the advice on their lands, what it was like for them, and what they want to see going forward. Because when elders share their stories and when elders share the past, it becomes a next step for us to move forward in a good way based on past experiences shared by the elders. One thing is not to lose your culture, regain your identity, and to keep your language. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, no, that's encouraging. I feel like some of those elements we definitely are present here in Catalonia, but others are not. Maybe to go back to the government element, in Catalonia, we are ashamed to say that we have never had a female president. And even in our bioregion, La Garrotxa, which is made up of 21 municipalities, right now there are only 4 female mayors of those 21 municipalities. In fact, 8 years ago, there were 0, and 4 years ago, there were 2. So we're improving, but we still have a long way to go. This is obviously a challenging process to shift this patriarchal inertia. What has been your personal experience to become the first Nisga'a female president? And what would you tell other people who self-identify as women and who are thinking about doing something in the political field? would you encourage them? What would you say?
Thank you. My experience, personal experience has been so rewarding. At the outset, coming in, I never really thought about the kind of challenges that I would face. But certainly, there's challenges in every society within everything that we do. But it's up to individuals to overcome those challenges. And I certainly overcame and won the respect of all of the government and won the respect, especially from the male-dominated government process that we've had over the years. And it came from not only my early work with the nation, but my knowledge of what our elders want. Knowledge, when I say our ancestors, because they've long since been gone now. And when I think about other women who want to get into these kind of prestigious roles, I would definitely encourage them, and to encourage them to work their way up, because that's what I did. That's why I'm saying, based on my own personal experience, I climbed to the top. That's what I did. And when you climb to the top, you have the knowledge, you have intimate knowledge of your nation. Thank you. And I
Yeah.
definitely would encourage it.
Good. That's good to hear. So it's been a positive experience, it sounds like, although perhaps there was some moments of, I was sensing you had to maybe push through a little bit of the male dominated culture as well, still, nonetheless.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm sure there's lots of good stories there as well. I have a couple more questions, but actually I think I would like to hand it over because I feel there's some really interesting things coming up. I will hand it to the people here in the audience to ask some questions, and then maybe I'll close with a final question. So I'll say it in Catalan. Hola y buenas. No sé si algú té alguna pregunta que vol fer a l'Eva. I podeu aixecar la mà amb el Zoom o activar la càmera i dir hola i fer la pregunta així també. I think there's Marta o Gerard. Perdó, no sé si. I think there's some technological challenges here. I'll keep going then because I do have a couple questions. Or is it Susanna before I go? No, okay. So in terms of the structure of the government, how do you engage or involve the whole community? Because I visited Nisga'a territory once for my father's adoption, and I was really, really impressed with it. Sorry, just a second, I'm going to silence that. With the community feast that I was a part of, and the sharing, even the economy, I think it was based on a gift economy. For the adoption ceremony, there was a gift giving of blankets to everybody. But I was just wondering, in terms of engaging the community in the decision-making processes and in the stewardship or caretaking of the land, how do you do that?
Thank you for the question. Nisga'a government engages its citizens every 2 years for what we call a special assembly. But through the government process, we have the village governments who meet on a monthly basis, who hold public meetings with their citizens. And the other area is through Nisga'a government committee processes. Members can bring their concerns to their elected, who then in turn bring it to the government, similar to what provincial and federal government do in Canada today, only at a smaller scale. Thank you.
Okay, okay. But are there any cultural practices as well that are perhaps more traditional or ancestral that you still practice that engage the community as well?
Yes, that's separate from government. What we've done is we have a governance model, and the traditional roles of our culture is kept with the hereditary chieftains. And when there's weddings, when there's deaths, when there's stone movings, that's all cultural. It's held in by each family who's been affected, and they hold those feasts, what we call stone moving feasts, settlement feasts, marriage feasts, or banquets. But yes, that's held at another level from government.
Okay, interesting. So it's kind of like two governments that coexist almost. Is that
When you think
no?
about it.
Yeah. Okay. And we have a question actually from another organ actually in government that's been recently created called the Council, the People's Council, which was it's a new thing that we are trying out, which is where people are elected by the village. But they don't put themselves up for election. They are selected because people have said that person, I think, represents me. And then we see how many people have said that person or that person represents me. And so it's sometimes people are very surprised when they've been elected to the People's Council, because they're often humble people, and it's and they're quite honored by this position. And it's an organ that actually I will leave it to the Argelege people to explain a little bit more. And actually, maybe because it's so complicated, I will ask Olga if you can just translate this part. Okay. Sí, va bé?
Ja? Bé, jo m'ha agradat molt escoltar el que estava explicant, però jo veig que nosaltres aquí som una societat que estem molt desenvolupada, molt avançada, de manera que comparo amb el que ell ha explicat, que sembla que és una societat que està en evolució, que està treballant al camp, que s'estan organitzant, tot i que pot fer molts anys, però que vull dir que nosaltres, amb la globalització, que no sé si ho he dit ja, doncs hem espatllat moltes coses. Escoltàvem les experiències de la gent gran, de com feien les coses, perquè estàvem treballant en el camp, teníem animals per nosaltres, pel consum, però també se'n venien, no? Però era una societat molt més comunificada dins el poble, inclús. Parlàvem molt més, érem molt més amics, molt més... Bueno, el dia a dia era fàcil, no? Llavors, la pregunta és com es fa amb la societat que tenim ara per fer un Consell d'ancians. No veig... Bueno, potser ella tampoc ha explicat del tot com ho han fet per muntar... Com es podria fer aquí per muntar un Consell d'ancians? Perquè tenim molts...
Com? No, que és de l'origen, no, també?
De l'origen, sí. L'origen de què es...
Okay. And perdó, Olga, just sorry, I'm gonna translate this. Olga, perdó, que he fet la traducció. Si vols ho dic en veu alta ara, o ja ho has fet? Ok, perfecte, ok. La propera vegada ho faig jo, perdó, m'espantava. So, Eva and Paul and Mariana, I guess you heard this question. Yeah, was it clear? So
I
specifically,
got the gist of the question.
if you want, I can rephrase the end part of the question. So we're talking actually to a group of people right now who are part of the People's Council of a small village in La Garrotxa, a municipality. And they were just saying, I mean, globalization has been really challenging, has really shifted societal values. It's become more consumeristic. We used to be more united, and we used to talk more. There was more friendliness on the street. So how do we do it with the current situation right now to create a council of elders? I think, and she's making that link between this kind of society that has become a little bit more less interrelated. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for the question. One of the what's really important for the Nisga'a Nation is that we hold our elders in the highest regard. If it wasn't for our elders and our ancestors who did all of the work and who brought us to where we are today, we wouldn't be where we are today without them. So that's why we hold them in the highest regard. But in Catalonia, you have the potential to bring back your elders, bring your elders to their rightful place. One of the ways to do that, and what we did leading up to treaty, is we had an elders conference. Gather the elders to begin discussions on how you can move forward to officially establish your elders group, who will ultimately guide you in your next steps, and guide you in regaining your true identity, your culture, and the ownership of your land. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
No, thank you very, very much.
If I may add, there is a lot of history within the Nisga'a Nation, and in our Department of Communications, we have a number of VHS tapes that we are currently digitizing, and we're winding down to the last few boxes. But in those videotapes, the late James Gosnell saw the importance of capturing our leaders and our elders and our nation, sharing what they wanted to see in the Nisga'a Treaty. And a lot of that was said in our language, and a lot of those videos that the NTC purchased in the 1980s it captured a lot of the Nisga'a Nation elders. They had a number of, as the president has mentioned, they had elders conferences that captured the Adawak of the Nisga'a Land Committee and the Adawak of each and every chief and matriarch, their land. Every chief and matriarch has a house that they belong to, and they all have ancient stories of their that belongs to their house, and as well as survival stories of the Great Flood, the volcano eruption on Nisga'a land. And with all of these videotapes, the Nisga'a Tribal Council was successful at 42 annual Nisga'a conventions. And so with all of that, it really is a broad range of discussion, and a lot of it being done in the language with fisheries, wildlife, lands resource, as mentioned in the presentation, but those were all caught on tape, and we're pretty much one of the only First Nations in all of Canada that has 40 years of history, language, and culture all displayed in those videos from many of those elders who are no longer here today.
What a rich resource. And I mean, if there's a possibility maybe of hearing a clip of one of these videos, if that's possible, but
there is one clip in the film that's going to be played later
Okay.
on.
okay.
When it's
All right.
of one of our leaders, late Rod Robinson.
Okay. I mean, these are perhaps also links if we can get them afterwards, that would be really lovely to share with people who are participating. I see a interesting comment from Carmina Escardó, and I will translate. I'll actually, Carmina, would you be able to read it out loud? And then I can translate it for Olga into English for Eva and Paul.
Val. Molt breument, des dels consells de la gent gran, concretament de l'Alt Empordà, que és el que conec, doncs s'està intentant portar una sèrie de manifestos perquè els ajuntaments prenguin en compte les necessitats de la gent gran i sobretot el que s'està intentant manifestar és que el segment d'elders, de gent gran, és avui dia molt gran. És a dir, no és el mateix 60 que 100 anys. Són 40 anys de diferència. Aleshores, són coses que s'han de prendre molt en compte. Hi ha una base d'edat que encara pot ser molt activa i molt necessària per a la societat. Hi ha altres que ja són dependents. Aleshores, s'han de tractar totes les realitats perquè són àmbits d'edat molt, molt amplis. És a dir, és el mateix que si agaféssim entre 20 i 60. Doncs és el mateix entre 60 i 100. Tenim la mateixa problemàtica. Per altra banda, també voldria dir una cosa. El fet de no incorporar la gent gran en les nostres societats és un problema que ens ve ja des de nosaltres mateixos, perquè les generacions de 30, 40, 50 són molt potents i es deixa bastant de costat a la gent que han acabat de treballar, etc. Vull dir que cal fer un esforç de tots. Si es vol, es pot. Això és la premissa. Gràcies.
Moltes gràcies, Carmina. Olga, I have it and I can translate it if that's good. Yeah, did Olga translate just to make sure, and then I can say it in English now? Okay. Okay, it's perfect. So Carmina was speaking about the Council of Elders, actually, in her region called Alt Empordà. And she says that they are trying to give input and feedback to the municipalities of that region and also to the regional government to ensure a greater participation and dignification and respect towards elders. But she was continuing saying that, but how do we do this with our current society? Very similar to what the poble, the Argelege was saying, because she says we're trying to do this, bring our voice to certain key topics that are being covered, but we're also representing a very wide range of ages from 60 years old to 100 years old. So we have a wide range of dependencies. So it's like saying, grabbing a from 20 to 60. It's saying that, I mean, obviously people from 20 to 60 years of age are not the same as 60 to 100. But she remarks that it's a social problem, not putting elders in the position that they should be in society, and it's a problem that comes right from us. The root is with us. She says with the strong ages of people in their 30s and 40s, they leave us behind. So, you know, how can we address something that is already in the culture?
Okay, thank you for the question. The Council of Elders, when we meet with municipalities or we meet outside of Nisga'a lands, we are inclusive of the Council of Elders. For example, if we are to meet with the Terrace municipality, which we have in the past, we would bring along our Council of Elders, not only the chair, but one of the main spokespeople, to share with the municipality what it is and how life in the municipality affects the citizens. One of the biggest voices for our elders and the biggest concerns is having a home for our elders, rather than send them out to municipalities, rather than take them away from Nisga'a culture. We want to keep them home on a homeland. So the government is looking at building assisted living elders homes, assisted living homes for our elders and for our younger people. We don't want them to leave home. We want to train our people to care for our people, and that's what's going to be happening. When you think about how we will meet with the municipalities, that's what we do. We bring along the elders, and that's what we do. Thank you.
Wonderful. That's very encouraging. Perhaps if other people have questions, if you can raise your hand and I will. Oh, there we go. We have one from Laura, and then perfect. Laura.
Hola, si em podeu traduir, Èrica. Gràcies. Primer de tot, gràcies. A mi m'agradaria preguntar, en el context de Catalunya o de la Garrotxa, no només hi conviu una cultura, són moltes cultures convisquent. I un dels reptes que ens trobem és poder generar aquest diàleg intercultural. A mi m'agradaria saber si el context que estan es troben en aquesta situació, que hi ha diferents cultures i que segurament sí, i com s'hi relacionen i com generen propostes conjuntes o inclús una cultura reconciliada.
Okay, so this question is from Laura. She says, first of all, thank you very much. I want to ask in the context of La Garrotxa, Catalunya, which is not just one culture, but many cultures co-living here, coexisting here. How do we generate an intercultural dialogue? Is this a case that you face? I imagine yes. And I'll add here, perhaps, especially in Vancouver and in, well, I don't know what other town you had mentioned as well. How do you interrelate? How do you do joint proposals or decisions together? How do you reconcile these differences?
Thank you for the question. The coexistence of many generations of different cultures in our lands has always been there. But what Nisga'a government has done is negotiated the final agreement for Nisga'a. But at the same time, we have that coexistence with many cultures. One area that, in order for me to speak about it, is the various cultures from indigenous people that reside on our Nisga'a lands come from another Indigenous group who is already at the table negotiating their final agreement. Canada and British Columbia won't allow one Indigenous person to participate in another treaty, say. So we have the treaty for the Nisga'a, but that doesn't mean that we don't allow them to participate. They do participate in that. We also have the other areas. They just don't have a seat on government, on Nisga'a government, because they have to be Nisga'a citizens. That's the big difference. But for Catalan, I think it's in order for that huge meeting to take place. It depends what the Catalan is going to be going after in terms of what it is that you want. You want intercultural structure. That will have to be those kind of discussions will have to take place with the intercultural people within your area. Thank you.
And maybe just to add a little bit to that question, do you have any mechanisms that you use culturally or through the government that you think would facilitate dialogue at that level between very different or sometimes similar cultures?
It's probably what we have is Nisga'a citizenship department. That really defines who can participate within the Nisga'a Nation. And it certainly is something that we can oversee, because when you think about the intercultural relationships, all of the intermarriages, the marriages, they can apply for Nisga'a citizenship. And through that process, they can participate within treaty.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I have a couple more questions, but I want to give the floor to people if anybody here has another question. Si algú té alguna pregunta. Més? I si no, llanço una altra, que és una mica vinculada al tema de joves que jo estava dient abans. Doncs, in Resilience Earth, in our cooperative here, we like to believe that even though these are really difficult times, we can emerge from this in a thriving way. And we envision a place where cultures can learn to be together and share world perspectives, humans and non-humans alike. And maybe this is our generational collective challenge to reach a global culture, ideally a global culture that is rooted in land and honors community, honors elders, honors youth as well, and through many different ways. And so the question is, as you know, many youth are having a very difficult time, especially after COVID. Do you have any hopeful messages for them?
Thank you. And yes, it's certainly challenging times for all of our generations. What Nisga'a government has realized early on after the final agreement, we realized the importance of including the youth, not only just the elders, but we also have youth, what we call the YOY, Youth Organizing Youth Program, which is comprised of a national body of youth. The village governments each have youth councils, likewise with the urban locals, urban societies, they have youth councils. And I think they've had at least one or two youth conferences, and it's through the education conferences that our youth get together. But they do get together. We brought them to Ottawa to meet other youth, Indigenous youth groups. So it's an exciting process for our youth. But Paul would have more information on the youth conferences. Paul?
Go ahead, Sydney. Yeah, so our department does carry out Youth and Elders Conference in partnership with the Iltiŕ Nisga'a department. And it's at those conferences where they have all 4 villages partake in what means most to them in regards to the culture, the language, and there is other very broad topics as well, such as the education conference, and there is a biennial special assembly of the Nisga'a Nation as well, and it's at these conferences where our government, Nisga'a government, gets to hear firsthand of what means most to the Nisga'a people. And in our language, in our culture, our elders have a saying is always listen to the people. Our elders would say in our language. And that was it's one of the only ways that we are very successful is listening to our people. Yeah, so with the Youth and Elders Conference, they take those suggestions and form them into resolutions that forms a pathway that the Iltiŕ Nisga'a and the Council of Elders can carry out, and they can bring those important discussions to the table for implementation of new policies or laws or policy change. So that's the role of the youth engagement coordinator within our department and the Iltiŕ Nisga'a department and the Council of Elders.
Thank you very much. These, I'm sure, are going to be giving some people here some good ideas. I can see at least 3 or 4 people actually work with youth every day, either as teachers or as youth workers. So they're always looking for inspiring ideas and initiatives, and perhaps even people to partner with. So I'll say it in Catalan. Doncs no sé si algú més té alguna pregunta sobre temes de govern, temes de cultura, com per l'altre webinari vam parlar molt de cerimònia, de relació amb el territori, i si no, en Paul ens ofereix un vídeo de 5 minuts, però sense traducció, que és simplement cants en Nisga'a i ball. Doncs, si us sembla, són 5 minuts de vídeo. Sí. I després podem fer una cluenda. So I was just explaining, Paul, what we'll be doing, and if you want to just give a quick intro, and we'll have 5 minutes of this video, and then a closing round. Thank you.
I have meditated regarding the land, the Nisga'a land. It's sort of a ritual before we begin to talk about the land.
Today, let us talk about reconciliation and a new understanding between cultures. Nistum de polarië dat samen skondum de mahal is nisem. Zawel meno yansem. As mis max kom get van stop niet in de jongens ayo, as we nou wil toch zeggen. Zawel meno yansem. We join Canada and British Columbia as free citizens, full and equal participants in the social, economic and political life of this country. That has been our dream for more than a century. Today, it becomes reality. People sometimes wonder why we have struggled so long to sign a treaty. Why, we are asked, did our elders and elected officials dedicate their lives to a resolution of the land question? What is it about the treaty? To the Nisga'a nation, a treaty is a sacred instrument. It represents an understanding between distinct cultures and shows respect for each other's way of life. It stands as a symbol of high idealism in a divided, fractious world. That is why we fought so long and so hard. I've been asked many, many times, has it been worth it? Was it worth all this effort and suffering, pain and humiliation? Absolutely, it was worth it. But believe me, it's been a long and difficult and hard-fought fight, compromises that were made. It still breaks my heart to see our young men and women sentenced to a life of seasonal, dead-end jobs, to see the despair and disillusionment on the faces of my people. I also wish to acknowledge our leaders, past and present, for their commitment and dedication to the Nisga'a cause. I acknowledge all our supporters and express the gratitude of the Nisga'a nation for your help, spiritual and moral. Look around you. Look into the faces of our people. You're looking into the faces of people who have survived. We're survivors. That's what we are. We intend to live in this land forever. No longer beggars in our own lands. We now go forward with dignity, equipped with the confidence that we can make important contributions, social, political, and economic, to Canadian society. The Nisga'a Treaty proves beyond all doubt that negotiations, not lawsuits, not road blockades, not violence, are the most effective, most honorable way to resolve the Aboriginal issues in this country. Today, as you are my witness, the Nisga'a canoe returns to the Nass River. It has a cargo of hope and reconciliation. Because I am of the firm opinion that regardless of who says we don't own this land, we know as Aboriginal people that we do, and we want to participate in what happens within our respective territories.
How inspiring. Thank you so much, Paul. That was beautiful. And obviously, Eva and Marianne. So I'll leave it. If there's any final burning questions, we can take at least one, and then I would invite people to do a closing round like we did for the last webinar. Doncs si hi ha alguna pregunta més, i si no, podem fer una ronda aquí en el xat d'agraïments i podem anar dient adeu. No? Vale. Doncs, si podeu posar en el chat. So I'm just inviting people to send any messages to the big group in honor of your presentation and your time today. And I can do a quick translation into it. And also we do have time for one more question if people have a question, but if not, we can start closing. So it doesn't seem so. So Ellen is saying, thank you very much. Marta is saying, wow, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. The video was super beautiful. Please share it with us. It was a powerful presentation and very interesting. And we have other people saying, thank you very much for the lovely talk and for the simultaneous translation. Thank you. Thank you. Gracias. Thank you very much. Beautiful and inspiring. Where can we find the title of the video and the video online? Very inspiring. Thank you for your powerful presence for our earth, says Carmina. Thank you very much for your inspiring words, Marta. And Claudia says, gracias per tot. Thank you so much. It was very interesting. Thank you for the organization and the translation, and especially to the presenters today. And Gerard says, thank you so much. So yeah, well, muchísimas gracias, another one. And so again, I'll also echo this from the part of Resilience Earth. It has been an enormous pleasure to have you guys here today. And I hope we can collaborate in the future. And yes, and also a big thank you to Olga, who has been a superstar translating simultaneously for the last hour and a half. Gracias, Olga. Okay, so if people want to, you can activate your video. Si voleu activar el vídeo per dia 10, endavant. Ai, mira, tenim una nena petita. Okay, moltes gràcies a totes.